What if some of Hollywood's most famous love stories were never really about love at all? Behind the glamorous premieres, smiling magazine covers, and fairy tale weddings, the golden age of Hollywood often hid a much darker reality. Powerful studios controlled careers, public image mattered more than personal happiness, and some marriages appeared to serve business, publicity, or social expectations as much as romance. Today, we're exploring 50 classic Hollywood marriages that historians, biographers, and longtime Hollywood observers have questioned for the roles they played beyond love. Number 50. Barbara Stanwyck and Frank Fay. When Barbara Stanwyck married comedian Frank Fay in 1928, Hollywood magazines presented the union as another glamorous fairy tale. At the time, Fay was already an established Broadway and vaudeville performer, while Stanwyck was an ambitious young actress whose film career was just beginning. From the outside, they appeared to represent the perfect Hollywood success story. Behind closed doors, however, the marriage quickly became troubled. Numerous biographies describe Fay as controlling, deeply jealous of Stanwyck's growing fame, and increasingly difficult as his own career declined. Friends later recalled that their personalities rarely matched, and the affection seen during public appearances often disappeared once cameras were gone. The couple adopted a son, Dion, hoping family life might stabilize their relationship. Instead, the emotional distance between them continued to grow. While Stanwyck steadily became one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Fay struggled professionally, creating even greater tension inside the marriage. Several historians have suggested that maintaining the appearance of a happy family benefited both their public images during an era when divorce carried enormous stigma. Whether every public display of affection reflected genuine love remains impossible to know, but by the time they divorced in 1935, many insiders believed the relationship had long existed more as a public performance than a functioning marriage. Their story became one of Hollywood's earliest examples of a glamorous union that looked far happier on magazine covers than it ever did in real life. Number 49. Janet Gaynor and Adrian. When Academy Award-winning actress Janet Gaynor married legendary costume designer Adrian in 1939, Hollywood celebrated what looked like the perfect union of beauty and creativity. Adrian designed unforgettable costumes for MGM's biggest stars, while Gaynor had already become one of cinema's most beloved actresses. Almost immediately, however, whispers surrounded the marriage. Adrian's private life became the subject of speculation among Hollywood insiders for decades, with several later biographers discussing persistent rumors regarding his sexuality. None of those rumors were ever publicly confirmed by Adrian himself, and historians continue to debate their accuracy. What is certain is that their marriage remained unusually private. Both carefully protected their personal lives, rarely discussing intimate details with reporters. They focused instead on their successful careers while presenting a polished public image that suited the expectations of Hollywood studios and audiences alike. The couple remained married until Adrian's death in 1959, and many people close to them described the relationship as respectful and supportive. At the same time, some historians have argued that the marriage also provided valuable privacy during an era when personal reputations could determine professional survival. Rather than proving the marriage was fake, modern researchers generally describe it as one of several classic Hollywood relationships that inspired decades of speculation because the full truth remained known only to the two people involved. Number 48. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. Few classic Hollywood marriages have generated more debate than the 1955 wedding of Rock Hudson and his secretary, Phyllis Gates. At the time, Hudson ranked among the world's biggest movie stars, carefully managed by powerful agent Henry Wilson, who worked tirelessly to maintain his heartthrob image. For years, many writers described the marriage as a carefully arranged effort to quiet growing rumors about Hudson's private life. Several biographies argue that studio executives believed a public marriage would strengthen his leading man reputation and protect one of Universal Pictures' most valuable stars. Phyllis Gates consistently rejected claims that the marriage had been staged. She maintained throughout her life that she genuinely loved Hudson and entered the relationship believing it would last. After their divorce in 1958, she expressed deep disappointment and insisted she had never knowingly participated in any publicity scheme. Hudson himself never publicly described the marriage as fake. Only after his death did broader discussions about Hollywood's treatment of LGBTQ performers bring renewed attention to the relationship. Today, historians generally agree that powerful studio pressures surrounded the marriage, but they remain divided over how much each spouse understood about those pressures. That uncertainty has made Hudson and Gates's relationship one of the most discussed examples whenever people examine the complicated line between personal happiness and career survival during Hollywood's golden age. Number 47. Tyrone Power and Annabella. When Tyrone Power married French actress Annabella in 1939, fans celebrated one of Hollywood's most glamorous international romances. Power possessed movie star charm, while Annabella had already earned acclaim across Europe before arriving in America. Behind the scenes, however, the marriage faced constant strain. Their careers frequently kept them apart, and studio executives reportedly worried that Power's image as a romantic leading man could suffer if he appeared too settled. At the same time, rumors regarding his private relationships continued circulating throughout Hollywood society. Some later biographers have suggested that the marriage offered valuable protection from gossip while satisfying studio expectations. Others strongly disagree, pointing to numerous letters and accounts showing genuine affection between the couple despite their growing difficulties. Annabella deeply desired children, but the pair struggled to build the family life they had imagined. As years passed, emotional distance increased, eventually leading to divorce in 1948. Modern historians generally avoid calling the marriage fake. Instead, they describe it as a complicated relationship where real affection existed alongside enormous career pressures and relentless public scrutiny. Like many Golden Age marriages, separating authentic love from Hollywood image-making remains difficult because studios carefully controlled nearly every detail the public was allowed to see. Number 46. Rudolph Valentino and Natasha Rambova. Rudolph Valentino's marriage to costume designer Natasha Rambova fascinated newspapers almost from the day they met. Valentino stood as one of silent cinema's greatest romantic idols, while Rambova possessed artistic ambition and strong opinions about every aspect of filmmaking. Their marriage quickly became surrounded by controversy. Studio executives disliked Rambova's influence over Valentino's career, believing she pushed him toward projects audiences didn't want. Journalists eagerly portrayed her as controlling, while Valentino struggled to balance his personal loyalty with increasing professional pressure. As Valentino's career experienced setbacks, many observers blamed Rambova, fairly or not. Public appearances became carefully managed, creating an image of unity even as reports suggested serious disagreements behind closed doors. Some historians believe the couple genuinely loved one another, but became trapped inside Hollywood's relentless publicity machine. Others argue that maintaining the appearance of a united marriage became essential because both reputations depended heavily on public perception. Their divorce in 1926 ended years of speculation, though debate continues nearly a century later. Rather than proving the marriage itself was fake, their story illustrates how studio politics, public expectations, and non-stop media attention could transform even authentic relationships into performances staged for an audience eager to believe every Hollywood fairy tale. Number 45. William Haynes and Pola Negri. When silent screen legend Pola Negri married actor William Haynes in 1927, newspaper headlines celebrated what looked like another glamorous Hollywood romance. The wedding generated enormous publicity, with reporters describing the pair as one of the industry's newest power couples. Yet almost immediately, insiders questioned whether the marriage had ever been built on genuine romance. One important historical note deserves mention. Some early newspaper reports and later gossip columns created confusion surrounding Negri's relationships. Modern historians generally agree that William Haynes and Pola Negri were not legally married. Haynes, who was openly involved with his lifelong partner Jimmy Shields in private, instead faced intense studio pressure to hide his sexuality throughout his career. Negri herself became linked to several highly publicized romances that often served publicity purposes. Their names have frequently appeared together in discussions about Hollywood's manufactured love stories because both experienced enormous pressure to maintain carefully crafted public images. Studios during the late silent era regularly encouraged stars to appear romantically connected, even when little genuine romance existed. Haynes eventually refused to abandon Jimmy Shields, despite demands from MGM executives, sacrificing one of Hollywood's brightest acting careers rather than living a life built entirely on appearances. His decision remains one of the industry's most courageous acts of personal honesty. Although this particular marriage has often been repeated in Hollywood myths, it illustrates something even more revealing. During the Golden Age, publicity frequently blurred the line between fact, rumor, and carefully staged romance, until audiences could barely distinguish one from another. Number 44. Cary Grant and Betsy Drake. When Cary Grant married actress Betsy Drake in 1949, fans believed the charming leading man had finally found lasting happiness. Drake was intelligent, witty, and shared Grant's interest in psychology and personal growth. Unlike many Hollywood romances, theirs initially appeared surprisingly genuine. Yet the marriage soon became unusually unconventional. Grant spent long periods away filming around the world while Drake remained behind pursuing her own interests. Friends noticed they increasingly lived separate lives, though they continued presenting a united front whenever photographers appeared. Biographers have pointed out that Grant carefully protected every aspect of his personal life. Rumors regarding his sexuality circulated throughout Hollywood for decades, especially because of his close friendship and long cohabitation with actor Randolph Scott. Neither man ever publicly confirmed those rumors, and historians remain divided over what, if anything, they truly reflected. For that reason, scholars generally avoid calling Grant's marriage to Drake fake. Instead, they describe it as one of several relationships that became surrounded by speculation because Grant maintained extraordinary privacy throughout his life. The couple divorced in 1962 after 13 years together. Drake later spoke kindly of Grant despite their separation, suggesting affection remained even after the romance faded. Today, their marriage is remembered less as a proven publicity arrangement and more as another reminder that Hollywood's brightest stars often lived private lives far more complicated than the perfect romances audiences believed they were watching. Number 43. Joan Crawford and Franchot Tone. In 1935, Joan Crawford married actor Franchot Tone after one of Hollywood's most publicized courtships. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer eagerly promoted the romance, recognizing that pairing two major stars generated enormous publicity both on and off the screen. Despite the glamorous beginning, cracks appeared almost immediately. Crawford possessed relentless ambition and understood exactly how to navigate Hollywood's demanding studio system. Tone, meanwhile, preferred theater and serious dramatic work over celebrity culture. Their priorities often pulled them in completely different directions. Several friends later claimed that the marriage functioned better during public appearances than in private. Magazine photographs showed elegant dinners, smiling vacations, and affectionate embraces. But behind closed doors, disagreements reportedly became frequent. Historians generally believe genuine attraction existed between the couple. However, many also note that MGM benefited enormously from promoting the relationship, sometimes encouraging carefully staged publicity photographs that reinforce their glamorous image. Their divorce in 1939 surprised few insiders who had witnessed the growing distance between them. Crawford quickly continued building one of Hollywood's most successful careers, while Tone increasingly focused elsewhere. Rather than representing a completely fake marriage, theirs demonstrated how authentic romance could gradually become overshadowed by studio marketing. As the cameras continued capturing perfect smiles, the relationship itself quietly unraveled away from public view, leaving behind another Hollywood love story, far less perfect than audiences imagined. Number 42. Jean Harlow and Paul Byrne. Jean Harlow's marriage to MGM producer Paul Byrne in 1932 lasted only a few weeks before tragedy struck. Byrne died under mysterious circumstances, creating one of the greatest scandals in Hollywood history, and generating rumors that continue nearly a century later. Almost immediately, speculation surrounded every aspect of their relationship. Gossip columns suggested the marriage had never been consummated. Others claimed Byrne suffered private medical problems. Some proposed elaborate conspiracies involving former lovers or studio cover-ups. Few of those claims have ever been conclusively proven. What historians generally agree upon is that MGM worked aggressively to protect both Byrne's reputation and Harlow's career after his death. The studio tightly controlled information released to newspapers, fueling even more speculation as reporters searched for answers. Because so many official records remain incomplete or contradictory, modern biographers urge caution when discussing the marriage. While rumors have often portrayed it as a union created more for appearances than romance, surviving evidence does not support such certainty. Instead, historians usually describe Harlow and Byrne's brief marriage as one of Hollywood's greatest unsolved personal mysteries. The secrecy surrounding Byrne's death transformed an already fragile relationship into decades of speculation, making it nearly impossible to separate documented facts from sensational stories repeated through generations of Hollywood gossip. Number 41. Lana Turner and Lex Barker. By the time Lana Turner married actor Lex Barker in 1953, both were among Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Turner had already experienced several highly publicized relationships, while Barker remained famous for portraying Tarzan on screen. Their marriage looked glamorous in photographs, but privately it deteriorated with astonishing speed. Friends described constant arguments, emotional distance, and increasing unhappiness almost from the beginning. After only a few years, the relationship collapsed amid disturbing allegations involving Turner's young daughter Cheryl Crane. Those allegations permanently damaged Barker's public image, though he consistently denied wrongdoing. Historians note that many aspects of the controversy remain debated because evidence was limited and conflicting accounts emerged over time. What remains clear is that the marriage had become deeply dysfunctional long before the divorce. Public appearances continued projecting elegance and sophistication, even while the family endured enormous emotional turmoil behind closed doors. Unlike some Hollywood unions arranged primarily for publicity, Turner's marriage to Barker almost certainly began with genuine intentions. Yet the pressure to preserve appearances delayed public acknowledgement of just how badly the relationship had deteriorated. Their story reminds us that many Golden Age marriages appeared flawless under studio lights, while privately facing problems far beyond anything audiences could have imagined, from the smiling photographs filling movie magazines across America. Number 40. Rita Hayworth and Prince Ali Khan. When Rita Hayworth married Prince Ali Khan in 1949, newspapers around the world declared it the wedding of the century. Hollywood's glamorous red-haired superstar had fallen in love with international royalty, creating a romance that seemed lifted directly from one of her own films. The marriage instantly became an international publicity sensation. Every vacation, every social event, and every family gathering attracted photographers eager to capture the fairy tale. Yet the enormous attention also created relentless pressure. Hayworth reportedly hoped marriage would offer a quieter, happier life away from Hollywood. Instead, she found herself surrounded by constant media attention and rumors concerning Ali Khan's relationships with other women. Gossip columns eagerly reported every alleged affair, making privacy nearly impossible. Some later writers suggested that the marriage became more valuable as a public spectacle than as a personal relationship. While there is no evidence it was arranged or fake from the beginning, maintaining the glamorous image often appeared more important than addressing the growing unhappiness inside the marriage itself. By 1953, the fairy tale had ended in divorce. Hayworth later admitted that life as a princess had been far different from the dream she once imagined. Their relationship remains one of classic Hollywood's most famous examples of how extraordinary public attention can transform a genuine romance into a carefully watched performance, leaving little room for ordinary married life. Number 39. Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. When Joan Crawford married Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in 1929, Hollywood celebrated the union as the perfect combination of beauty, ambition, and movie star royalty. Crawford was rapidly becoming one of MGM's brightest actresses, while Fairbanks Jr. carried the famous family name of silent film legend Douglas Fairbanks Sr. Despite the glamorous headlines, the marriage faced challenges almost immediately. Crawford's career was exploding, and she embraced every opportunity to climb Hollywood's ladder. Fairbanks Jr., meanwhile, was still searching for his own identity as an actor, and often found himself compared to his legendary father. Those differences reportedly created growing tension inside the relationship. Biographers have written that the couple genuinely cared for one another, but they also lived under constant studio pressure to appear as Hollywood's ideal husband and wife. Magazine photographs regularly showed elegant dinners, romantic vacations, and smiling premieres, reinforcing an image that many insiders believed had become increasingly artificial. By the early 1930s, the emotional connection had weakened considerably. Friends later suggested that maintaining appearances became easier than admitting the marriage was failing. Their divorce in 1933 officially ended the relationship, though both remained respectful of each other publicly. Rather than a marriage created entirely for publicity, historians generally view Crawford and Fairbanks Jr.'s relationship as one that began with sincere affection, but gradually became overshadowed by ambition, public expectations, and the relentless demands of Hollywood's studio system. Number 38. Greer Garson and Richard Ney. Greer Garson shocked many Hollywood observers when she married Richard Ney in 1943. She was already one of MGM's biggest stars, and more than a decade older than her handsome young co-star. Their romance quickly attracted enormous public attention, partly because of the age difference and partly because the studio enthusiastically promoted the relationship. Initially, fans viewed the marriage as proof that love ignored age. However, behind the scenes, friends noticed that their lifestyles differed dramatically. Garson preferred privacy and stability, while Ney enjoyed social events and increasingly pursued interests beyond acting. Several Hollywood historians have suggested that MGM appreciated the publicity surrounding the marriage because it kept Garson constantly in magazine headlines during the height of her popularity. Public appearances were carefully photographed, reinforcing the image of a perfectly happy couple. Although there is little evidence the marriage itself was arranged, many writers believe the public presentation of the relationship became highly managed. As years passed, personal differences became impossible to hide, and the marriage ended in divorce in 1947. Both moved on with their lives, but the relationship remains another example of how authentic romances could slowly become transformed into carefully packaged Hollywood stories. What audiences saw on movie screens and magazine covers often reflected only a small portion of the complicated reality unfolding behind closed doors. Number 37. Esther Williams and Ben Gage. Swimming superstar Esther Williams married singer and actor Ben Gage in 1945, creating what appeared to be another picture-perfect MGM romance. Both possessed charm, talent, and tremendous public popularity, making them a natural attraction for entertainment journalists. For years, they smiled together at premieres, charity events, and glamorous Hollywood parties. Yet Williams later revealed in her autobiography that the marriage had become deeply unhappy. She described Gage's excessive drinking, financial irresponsibility, and repeated infidelity as constant sources of pain. Despite those struggles, the couple remained together for more than a decade. Historians believe part of the reason involved Hollywood's strong preference for maintaining stable public images. Divorce was still viewed negatively, especially for major female stars whose wholesome reputations contributed significantly to their careers. Publicly, they continued presenting themselves as a successful family. Privately, however, the relationship steadily deteriorated until they finally divorced in 1959. Williams later spoke openly about the emotional difficulties she endured, giving historians valuable insight into how appearances often concealed unhappiness. Their marriage wasn't fake in its beginning, but by its later years, many observers believe the polished public image no longer reflected the reality of their daily lives, illustrating once again how Hollywood's glamorous facade frequently masked painful personal truths. Number 36. Robert Taylor and Barbara Stanwyck. When Barbara Stanwyck married Robert Taylor in 1939, MGM executives could hardly have designed a more marketable couple. Stanwyck was admired for her intelligence and dramatic talent, while Taylor ranked among the studio's most handsome leading men. Together, they became one of Hollywood's premier power couples. Behind the scenes, however, their personalities differed considerably. Stanwyck focused intensely on her career and valued independence. Taylor enjoyed outdoor life, ranching, and a quieter existence away from cameras. Although genuine affection clearly existed, the relationship often struggled under conflicting priorities. Historians have also noted that MGM enthusiastically promoted their marriage because it strengthened both stars' public appeal. Carefully arranged publicity photographs portrayed an ideal domestic life that rarely revealed the ordinary disagreements experienced by any married couple. During World War II, Taylor's military service added long periods of separation, placing further strain on the relationship. After returning home, the emotional distance reportedly continued growing until they divorced in 1952. Modern researchers generally reject claims that the marriage itself was fake. Instead, they argue that its public image became increasingly polished and carefully managed as difficulties emerged privately. Their story demonstrates how even authentic love could become transformed into a Hollywood product, with studios helping maintain an illusion of perfection long after cracks had begun appearing beneath the surface. Number 35. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. Judy Garland's marriage to acclaimed director Vincente Minnelli in 1945 appeared to unite two of MGM's greatest creative talents. Garland's extraordinary voice had made her one of Hollywood's most beloved performers, while Minnelli had already established himself as an innovative filmmaker with remarkable artistic vision. The couple welcomed daughter Liza Minnelli, who would later become an entertainment legend herself. Yet despite that joyful milestone, the marriage faced enormous personal challenges. Garland battled health problems, addiction issues, and overwhelming studio pressure, while Minnelli devoted countless hours to demanding film productions. For decades, rumors surrounding Minnelli's sexuality circulated widely in Hollywood. Several respected biographers have discussed those rumors, though Minnelli himself never publicly confirmed them. Historians therefore caution against presenting speculation as established fact. What is well documented is that Garland and Minnelli genuinely admired each other's artistic abilities. Friends frequently described periods of warmth and affection between them, even as personal struggles intensified. Their divorce in 1951 reflected a combination of emotional strain, career pressures, and Garland's worsening personal difficulties, rather than any single dramatic event. Today, historians generally view their marriage as authentic, but extraordinarily complicated. Like many Golden Age relationships, later rumors often overshadowed the documented reality that two exceptionally talented people genuinely attempted to build a life together under the crushing weight of Hollywood fame. Number 34. Katharine Hepburn and Ludlow Ogden Smith. Before becoming one of Hollywood's most independent and celebrated actresses, Katharine Hepburn married Philadelphia businessman Ludlow Ogden Smith in 1928. The marriage lasted only a few years, yet its unusual nature has fascinated historians ever since. Almost immediately after the wedding, Hepburn focused almost entirely on building her acting career. She spent extended periods away from home pursuing theater opportunities before eventually moving into films. Smith remained supportive, even encouraging her ambitions despite the growing distance between them. Unlike many Hollywood couples, they rarely attempted to convince the public they were living a fairy tale romance. In fact, Hepburn openly admitted years later that traditional married life simply did not suit her personality. She valued freedom, independence, and professional fulfillment above conventional domestic expectations. Although they separated relatively quickly, they delayed formal divorce for several years, partly because of social attitudes surrounding divorce during that era. Some writers have therefore described the marriage as existing largely on paper long after the emotional relationship had ended. Historians generally agree this was not a fake marriage arranged by studios or publicity agents. Instead, it became an early example of two people realizing they wanted fundamentally different lives while continuing to handle their separation with mutual respect. Hepburn's experience would shape her lifelong views on relationships, making this brief marriage an important chapter in understanding one of Hollywood's most remarkable and unconventional stars. Number 33. Doris Day and Martin Melcher. By the time Doris Day married producer Martin Melcher in 1951, she had become one of America's most beloved actresses and recording stars. Their marriage appeared stable, affectionate, and successful, with Melcher frequently portrayed as the supportive husband helping guide Day's flourishing career. Behind the scenes, however, the relationship became far more complicated. Melcher took increasing control over Day's finances and professional decisions. She trusted him completely, believing he was protecting both her career and their future. Friends later recalled that she rarely questioned his judgment. When Melcher died in 1968, Day made a devastating discovery. She learned that he and his business manager had left her deeply in debt, despite the fortune she had earned during decades in Hollywood. She was forced to return to work, including starring in The Doris Day Show, largely because of the financial crisis she unexpectedly inherited. Historians generally agree that Day genuinely loved Melcher and never believed the marriage served publicity purposes. However, many later biographers argue that the public image of a perfectly managed Hollywood partnership concealed a relationship in which one spouse exercised overwhelming financial control over the other. Rather than being fake from the beginning, the marriage illustrates how appearances could hide profound personal realities. Millions admired them as an ideal couple, while Day herself remained unaware of the financial decisions quietly being made behind the scenes until it was far too late. Number 32. Joan Bennett and Walter Wanger. Actress Joan Bennett married influential producer Walter Wanger in 1940, creating one of Hollywood's most respected power couples. Together they raised a family while collaborating professionally, and for years they projected an image of sophistication, stability, and success. Everything changed in 1951 when Wanger shot Bennett's talent agent, Jennings Lang, believing the two were having an affair. The shocking incident dominated newspaper headlines across America and instantly shattered the couple's carefully maintained reputation. Although Lang survived, Wanger was convicted and served time in prison. Remarkably, Bennett remained married to him after the scandal. Many observers found that decision astonishing, especially considering the enormous public humiliation both had endured. Hollywood historians have debated why the marriage continued. Some believe Bennett hoped to preserve her family during an extraordinarily difficult period. Others suggest that divorce would have created even greater public damage at a time when scandal could permanently destroy careers. The marriage eventually ended in 1965, but for many years afterward, they continued presenting themselves publicly as a united couple despite the trauma they had experienced. Their story reminds us that not every Hollywood marriage survived because love remained strong. Sometimes couples stayed together because the alternatives seemed even more damaging to their families, careers, and carefully cultivated public identities. Number 31. Gene Simmons and Stuart Granger. British stars Gene Simmons and Stuart Granger appeared to embody elegance when they married in 1950. Handsome, talented, and admired on both sides of the Atlantic, they quickly became one of Hollywood's favorite couples. Early interviews suggested genuine affection between them. Both enjoyed successful acting careers, and together they built a comfortable family life. Yet the realities of constant filming, international travel, and competing professional demands gradually created emotional distance. Granger later admitted that both he and Simmons became deeply absorbed in their individual careers. Long periods apart became common, making it increasingly difficult to maintain a close relationship. Publicly, however, they continued attending premieres, award ceremonies, and studio events together, reinforcing their glamorous reputation. Some biographers argue that their marriage remained publicly stronger than privately during its later years. The studio system still preferred presenting successful stars as emotionally stable, and both actors understood the value of preserving that image. After nearly a decade together, they divorced in 1960. Neither publicly attacked the other, and both spoke respectfully about their years together afterward. Rather than a publicity marriage, historians generally describe their relationship as one where genuine love slowly faded under the weight of demanding careers. It stands as another reminder that Hollywood's most convincing romances sometimes became performances long before audiences realized anything had changed. Number 30. Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher. Few Hollywood marriages captured America's imagination like Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher. They were young, successful, attractive, and seemed to represent the perfect post-war American family. Their daughter, Carrie Fisher, would later become one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. For years, fans believed they had found true happiness. Magazine covers celebrated their growing family, while reporters praised them as the entertainment industry's ideal couple. Everything changed when Fisher began an affair with Elizabeth Taylor following the death of Taylor's husband, Mike Todd, who had been Fisher's close friend. The scandal became one of Hollywood's biggest tabloid sensations, transforming America's favorite marriage into front-page controversy almost overnight. Although the marriage clearly began with genuine love, historians note that Reynolds and Fisher continued making carefully managed public appearances even as the relationship collapsed privately. Studio executives hoped to limit damage to both stars' careers, while reporters chased every rumor. Their divorce in 1959 officially ended the fairy tale, but the public fascination never disappeared. Reynolds later spoke openly about the heartbreak she experienced, while Fisher acknowledged mistakes that permanently altered his reputation. Their marriage wasn't fake, but its perfect public image certainly became one. It demonstrated how Hollywood could preserve an illusion of domestic happiness long after reality had completely fallen apart. Number 29. Esther Williams and Fernando Lamas. After divorcing Ben Gage, Esther Williams married Argentine actor Fernando Lamas in 1969. By then, both were established stars with decades of Hollywood experience. Their marriage generated headlines because of their glamorous international image and shared celebrity status. Unlike many previous Hollywood unions, Williams later described this relationship as both passionate and challenging. Lamas possessed a commanding personality, often insisting on controlling household decisions and expecting traditional gender roles. Friends frequently joked about his strong opinions, while Williams openly acknowledged that they argued often. Nevertheless, she also admitted that beneath those disagreements existed genuine affection and loyalty. Because both had experienced failed marriages before, some reporters questioned whether the relationship had been driven partly by publicity. Historians, however, generally reject that theory. Instead, they describe the marriage as authentic but highly unconventional. The couple remained together until Lamas's death in 1982, proving more durable than many critics expected. Their story illustrates an important lesson repeated throughout Hollywood history. Unconventional marriages were often misunderstood by outsiders. Public assumptions sometimes painted relationships as artificial simply because they failed to resemble traditional romantic ideals, even when the emotional commitment between spouses remained very real. Number 28. Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. When Janet Leigh married Tony Curtis in 1951, Hollywood found its newest golden couple. Both were extraordinarily attractive, rising stars, and favorites of movie magazines eager to promote young romance. Universal Pictures enthusiastically encouraged the relationship, recognizing that audiences loved seeing attractive co-stars fall in love off-screen. Publicity departments arranged glamorous photo shoots featuring the smiling newlyweds in luxurious homes, fashionable clothing, and seemingly perfect domestic settings. Behind those carefully staged photographs, however, pressures mounted rapidly. Curtis later admitted feeling overshadowed by Lee's growing success at various points in their marriage. Meanwhile, constant filming schedules, media attention, and demanding careers left little room for ordinary family life. Although genuine love clearly existed, they welcomed daughters Kelly and Jamie Lee Curtis during the marriage. The emotional strain gradually became overwhelming. Curtis later acknowledged his own immaturity and personal mistakes, while Lee described the increasing distance between them. Their divorce in 1962 surprised many fans who had believed the Hollywood fairy tale. In reality, the perfect image presented to audiences had concealed years of growing unhappiness. Historians generally agree that Lee and Curtis truly loved one another, yet their public image eventually became far more flawless than the relationship itself, making them another example of Hollywood's remarkable ability to transform complicated human lives into seemingly perfect romantic fantasies. Number 27. Gene Tierney and Oleg Cassini. When Gene Tierney married fashion designer Oleg Cassini in 1941, Hollywood magazines immediately embraced the story. She was one of the most beautiful actresses of her generation, while Cassini was a talented designer whose sense of style perfectly matched Hollywood glamour. Together, they looked like the definition of elegance. Behind the dazzling photographs, however, their marriage faced obstacles almost from the beginning. Tierney's studio reportedly had reservations about the relationship, believing marriage could affect her carefully cultivated screen image. Despite those concerns, the couple married and welcomed 2 daughters. Their greatest heartbreak came after the birth of their first child, Daria, who was born with severe disabilities after Tierney contracted rubella during pregnancy. The emotional strain profoundly affected both parents and placed tremendous pressure on the marriage. Cassini's demanding career and reported infidelities further widened the gap between them. Although they divorced in 1952, they later reconciled briefly before separating permanently. Historians generally reject the idea that theirs was a publicity marriage. Instead, they describe it as a relationship that began with genuine passion but slowly collapsed under personal tragedy, career demands, and emotional exhaustion. Publicly, they continued appearing graceful and composed, while privately, they struggled through challenges that few fans ever realized existed behind Hollywood's polished facade. Number 26. Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra. When Ava Gardner married Frank Sinatra in 1951, the romance dominated headlines around the world. Sinatra left his first wife Nancy to marry Gardner, and the scandal only intensified public fascination. To millions, they appeared to be Hollywood's ultimate passionate couple. Their relationship was unquestionably real, but it was also famously turbulent. Explosive arguments, jealous confrontations, long separations, and demanding careers created a marriage filled with emotional highs and devastating lows. Friends often described them as deeply in love one day and barely speaking the next. Studios and publicists capitalized on the attention. Every reconciliation became news. Every reported argument sold newspapers. The marriage evolved into a public spectacle, making it difficult to distinguish genuine private moments from carefully managed publicity. Gardner later admitted they loved each other intensely, but were simply unable to live together peacefully. Sinatra echoed similar sentiments years afterward, acknowledging that neither had been emotionally equipped to sustain the relationship. Their divorce in 1957 ended one of Hollywood's most dramatic romances. Although sometimes included in discussions about Hollywood marriages for publicity, historians overwhelmingly agree the love between Gardner and Sinatra was authentic. What became artificial wasn't the marriage itself. It was the larger-than-life image surrounding it, as the entertainment industry turned every chapter of their personal lives into a headline. Number 25. Lana Turner and Stephen Crane. Lana Turner married businessman Stephen Crane twice, a remarkable fact that alone captured Hollywood's attention. Their first marriage in 1942 lasted only a few months before ending in divorce. Surprisingly, they remarried the following year, convincing many fans they had rediscovered true love. The second attempt proved little more successful. Financial troubles, constant arguments, and repeated separations defined much of their relationship. Despite those problems, the couple frequently appeared together in public, smiling for photographers and maintaining the appearance of domestic happiness. Several biographers suggest that Turner understood the importance of projecting stability during the height of her career. Divorce still carried social stigma, and Hollywood studios preferred their stars to appear settled rather than scandal-ridden. Eventually, the marriage ended permanently in 1944. Looking back, historians generally agree the repeated reunions reflected hope more than publicity. Turner genuinely wanted the relationship to succeed, even though the reality repeatedly failed to match the dream. Their story demonstrates how audiences often mistook carefully staged public appearances for proof of marital happiness. In truth, Hollywood photographers usually captured only a few carefully selected moments, while the far more complicated reality remained hidden behind closed doors. Number 24. Judy Garland and Sid Luft. Judy Garland married producer Sid Luft in 1952, during one of the most difficult periods of her life. Luft helped revive Garland's career, producing successful concerts and supporting her acclaimed comeback in A Star Is Born. Together, they seemed like a perfect professional and personal team. Initially, the marriage appeared strong. They welcomed 2 children and worked closely together on numerous projects. Luft became deeply involved in managing Garland's career, often negotiating contracts and overseeing business decisions. Over time, however, financial pressures, Garland's ongoing health struggles, addiction, and frequent disagreements severely strained the relationship. Friends recalled periods of genuine affection alternating with emotional conflict. Despite their growing problems, they remained publicly united for years. Hollywood magazines continued portraying them as a devoted family, while privately, the marriage steadily unraveled. They divorced in 1965, after years of instability. Historians generally reject any suggestion that the marriage was fake. Instead, they describe it as another example of a real relationship that became increasingly difficult to distinguish from its carefully managed public image. Garland desperately wanted both her career and family life to succeed, but the extraordinary pressures surrounding her fame made achieving either far more difficult than audiences ever imagined. Number 23. Joan Collins and Maxwell Reid. Long before becoming an international television icon, Joan Collins married Irish actor Maxwell Reid in 1952. At the time, Collins was a young actress beginning her rise to fame, while Reid already possessed industry experience and confidence. From the outside, they appeared glamorous and sophisticated. Inside the marriage, however, Collins later described a deeply unhappy relationship marked by controlling behavior and emotional manipulation. In her memoirs, she alleged that Reid attempted to exploit her career for financial gain and exercised unhealthy control over her personal life. Despite these problems, the couple maintained a polished public image during much of their marriage. Friends later observed that appearances often mattered enormously in 1950s Hollywood, where admitting marital difficulties could damage professional opportunities. Their divorce in 1956 allowed Collins to begin rebuilding both her personal and professional life. Historians do not describe the marriage as fake. Instead, they point to it as another example of how Hollywood's glamorous image frequently concealed relationships that were emotionally troubled. Audiences admired elegant photographs and smiling red carpet appearances without realizing the difficult realities many stars endured once the cameras stopped flashing. Number 22. Clark Gable and Kay Spreckles. Following the death of his beloved wife Carole Lombard, Clark Gable shocked many Hollywood observers by marrying socialite and former model Kay Spreckles in 1955. Fans hoped the legendary leading man had finally found happiness again after years of grief. The marriage, however, quickly attracted criticism from Hollywood insiders. Friends reportedly believed Gable never fully recovered from Lombard's death and questioned whether he had entered the relationship seeking companionship more than lasting romance. Although the couple appeared together at premieres and public events, biographers describe significant differences in personality and lifestyle. Gable preferred privacy, ranch life, and quiet evenings, while Spreckles enjoyed a more active social scene. Those differences gradually created emotional distance. Some historians argue that the marriage never possessed the warmth and natural chemistry Gable had shared with Lombard. Others caution that such comparisons are inherently unfair and impossible to measure objectively. Their marriage lasted only until 1960, when Gable died unexpectedly after completing The Misfits. Rather than labeling the relationship fake, historians generally describe it as a sincere attempt by two people to build a life together, under the shadow of past loss. Like many Hollywood marriages, public appearances projected confidence and happiness, even while private realities proved considerably more complicated. Number 21. Joan Fontaine and William Dozier. When Academy Award winner Joan Fontaine married television executive William Dozier in 1946, Hollywood viewed them as an ideal match. Fontaine had already become one of the industry's finest dramatic actresses, while Dozier was rapidly establishing himself as an influential producer and executive. At first, the marriage appeared remarkably stable. The couple attended premieres together, entertained Hollywood's elite, and projected an image of sophistication that studios eagerly promoted. Yet behind that polished exterior, their demanding careers frequently kept them apart. Fontaine was constantly filming, while Dozier devoted long hours to developing television and film projects. Several biographers have noted that both became increasingly focused on professional success rather than family life. Friends later recalled that conversations often revolved around work instead of their relationship. As emotional distance grew, they continued fulfilling public expectations by appearing together at industry events, where photographers captured smiling images that suggested everything was perfect. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1951 after 5 years together. Historians generally agree there is no evidence the marriage began as a publicity arrangement. Instead, it evolved into another example of a relationship where maintaining appearances became easier than acknowledging growing incompatibility. To moviegoers, they remained an elegant Hollywood couple. Privately, however, they had already begun traveling in very different directions long before the public learned their marriage was over. Number 20. Joan Crawford and Alfred Steele. When Joan Crawford married Pepsi-Cola executive Alfred Steele in 1955, many Hollywood reporters were surprised. Unlike her previous husbands, Steele wasn't a movie star. Instead, he was a respected businessman whose success came from the corporate world rather than the silver screen. The marriage immediately sparked speculation. Some columnists wondered whether Crawford hoped to reinvent herself as a sophisticated businesswoman, while others questioned whether Steele enjoyed the publicity that accompanied marrying one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Friends close to the couple offered a different picture. They described genuine affection between Crawford and Steele, noting that she admired his intelligence and stability after years of turbulent relationships. Steele, in turn, encouraged her business interests and welcomed her involvement with Pepsi's promotional campaigns. Following Steele's death in 1959, Crawford accepted a position on Pepsi's board of directors, reinforcing her public association with the company. That unusual career move later fueled rumors that the marriage had been more strategic than romantic. Modern historians generally reject those claims. They conclude that Crawford sincerely loved Steele, while acknowledging that the relationship also enhanced both of their public profiles. Their marriage illustrates how genuine affection and mutual professional benefit could exist simultaneously without automatically making a relationship artificial. Number 19. Elizabeth Taylor and Conrad Hilton Jr. Elizabeth Taylor was only 18 years old when she married hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton Jr. in 1950. MGM transformed the wedding into a spectacular media event, promoting it almost like one of Taylor's own movies. Newspapers around the world covered every detail, from her dress to the celebrity guest list. The fairy tale unraveled almost immediately. Taylor later revealed that Hilton struggled with heavy drinking, gambling, and violent behavior. Their honeymoon reportedly exposed serious problems that had been hidden during the whirlwind courtship. Friends were shocked by how quickly the glamorous romance deteriorated behind closed doors. Despite the obvious unhappiness, the newlyweds continued appearing publicly as Hollywood expected. Studios had invested enormous publicity into the wedding, and admitting failure so quickly was deeply embarrassing for everyone involved. After less than a year, Taylor filed for divorce, ending what became the first of her 8 marriages. Historians agree the relationship wasn't fake. Taylor genuinely believed she had found lasting love. However, they also point out that MGM carefully packaged the romance into a publicity event that greatly exceeded the reality of the relationship itself. Millions watched a fairy tale unfold, unaware that the marriage had already begun collapsing almost as soon as the wedding celebrations ended. Number 18. Jennifer Jones and David O. Selznick. Oscar-winning actress Jennifer Jones married legendary producer David O. Selznick in 1949 after years of working together professionally. Selznick had transformed Jones into one of Hollywood's biggest stars, making their relationship one of the industry's most closely watched romances. Their marriage combined romance with business in an unusually complicated way. Selznick continued guiding nearly every aspect of Jones's career, selecting projects, negotiating contracts, and carefully shaping her public image. That professional dependence led some observers to question whether the relationship resembled a marriage or a long-term business partnership. Friends insisted the couple genuinely cared for one another, but they also acknowledged that Selznick's controlling personality frequently blurred the boundaries between husband, producer, and manager. Publicly, they appeared devoted. They attended major Hollywood events together and maintained the appearance of a successful marriage, despite increasing personal and professional pressures. Following Selznick's death in 1965, Jones largely stepped away from acting, prompting many historians to reflect on just how closely her career had become tied to her husband's influence. Rather than describing the marriage as fake, modern biographers usually portray it as one of Hollywood's most complicated partnerships, one where love, ambition, artistic collaboration, and business became so deeply intertwined that separating one from another is nearly impossible. Number 17. Hedy Lamarr and Jean Markey. When glamorous actress and inventor Hedy Lamarr married screenwriter Jean Markey in 1939, the pairing attracted immediate attention across Hollywood. Lamarr had recently arrived in America following international controversy in Europe, while Markey already enjoyed success writing films and serving in the military reserve. Their marriage appeared stylish and sophisticated. The couple entertained frequently and became familiar faces at Hollywood gatherings. Yet beneath the glamorous lifestyle, differences emerged surprisingly quickly. Lamarr possessed extraordinary intellectual curiosity, spending countless hours developing scientific ideas and inventions. Markey, meanwhile, maintained a far more traditional Hollywood lifestyle. Friends later observed that their interests rarely aligned beyond public appearances. Although they adopted a son together, emotional distance continued growing. By 1941, the marriage had ended in divorce. Some later writers suggested that their relationship benefited both public images during Lamarr's transition into American stardom. Historians generally acknowledge that possibility, while emphasizing there is little evidence the marriage itself was arranged for publicity. Instead, they describe it as another example of two talented people whose lives simply moved in different directions. The elegant photographs and glamorous headlines suggested lasting happiness, but behind the scenes the relationship had already begun quietly falling apart, long before audiences realized anything was wrong. Number 16. Gloria Grahame and Nicholas Ray. The marriage between actress Gloria Grahame and acclaimed director Nicholas Ray remains one of classic Hollywood's most unusual and controversial relationships. They married in 1948, while both were building impressive careers, with Grahame becoming known for her unforgettable performances in film noir classics. For several years, they appeared to enjoy a successful creative partnership. Ray directed films while Graham's acting career flourished, making them a respected Hollywood couple admired for both talent and style. Everything changed when shocking family circumstances emerged. Years after their divorce, Grahame eventually married Anthony Ray, Nicholas Ray's son from a previous marriage. Although Anthony was an adult when that later marriage took place, the relationship created enormous public controversy and permanently linked the families in an extraordinary way. Looking back, many observers re-examined Gloria and Nicholas Ray's earlier marriage, wondering whether serious personal problems had existed long before the divorce. Historians caution against sensationalizing the story. There is no evidence their original marriage was a publicity arrangement or deliberately deceptive. Instead, it appears to have begun sincerely before eventually collapsing amid personal complications that few Hollywood couples had ever faced. Their story remains memorable not because the marriage was fake, but because the remarkable events that followed transformed it into one of Hollywood's most talked-about family sagas. Number 15. Joan Crawford and Philip Terry. When Joan Crawford married actor Philip Terry in 1942, Hollywood magazines quickly promoted the romance as another glamorous success story. Crawford was already one of MGM's most recognizable stars, while Terry was a rising actor known for his charm and polished screen presence. Together, they certainly looked like the perfect Hollywood couple. Behind the cameras, however, the marriage struggled to find lasting stability. Crawford's career remained her top priority, and her demanding filming schedule often kept the couple apart. Terry, meanwhile, found it increasingly difficult to establish himself independently while living in the shadow of one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The pair adopted a son during their marriage, hoping to build a happy family life. Sadly, tragedy struck when the child later passed away from illness, placing even greater emotional strain on the relationship. Despite their growing difficulties, Crawford and Terry continued making public appearances together, smiling for photographers, and attending premieres as though everything remained perfect. Studio publicity departments rarely acknowledged problems, preferring audiences to believe another Hollywood fairy tale. By 1946, the marriage ended in divorce. Historians generally reject claims that the relationship was created purely for publicity. Instead, they describe it as a genuine marriage that gradually became more convincing on magazine covers than inside the home. Like many Golden Age romances, the public image ultimately survived longer than the emotional connection itself. Number 14. Lana Turner and Bob Topping. In 1957, Lana Turner married businessman Bob Topping, heir to a wealthy New York family and former owner of the New York Yankees. Their wedding generated enormous media attention because it united one of Hollywood's biggest actresses with one of America's best-known businessmen. Initially, the relationship appeared glamorous. The couple traveled extensively, attended high-profile social events, and frequently appeared in newspapers enjoying luxurious vacations. Fans hoped Turner had finally found lasting happiness after several unsuccessful marriages. Privately, however, problems emerged. Topping reportedly struggled with excessive drinking and frequent health issues, while Turner's demanding acting career continued requiring long periods away from home. Friends later described increasing emotional distance between the couple, despite their polished public appearances. Hollywood columnists often praise them as one of entertainment's most sophisticated couples, but biographers suggest those glowing reports rarely reflected the growing strain inside the marriage. They divorced in 1958, after little more than a year together. Modern historians generally view the relationship as another sincere attempt at finding happiness, rather than a publicity arrangement. Nevertheless, the contrast between their glamorous public image and their increasingly unhappy private life perfectly illustrates how carefully managed appearances often concealed the realities of classic Hollywood marriages. Number 13. Rita Hayworth and Dick Haymes. When Rita Hayworth married singer Dick Haymes in 1953, many believed Hollywood's most famous redhead had finally recovered from the heartbreak of her divorce from Prince Ali Khan. Haymes possessed movie star looks, a successful singing career, and undeniable charisma. Unfortunately, the marriage quickly became overwhelmed by financial and legal difficulties. Haymes faced serious tax problems and immigration complications that frequently placed him in newspaper headlines. Those controversies inevitably affected Hayworth as well, despite her efforts to focus on rebuilding her own career. Friends later recalled that Hayworth desperately wanted stability after years of intense public attention. Instead, she found herself facing another relationship filled with stress and uncertainty. Even as problems mounted, the couple continued attending public events together, presenting a united front whenever cameras appeared. Magazine readers saw elegant smiles rather than the anxiety reportedly affecting both spouses behind closed doors. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1955 after only 2 years. Historians generally agree the relationship began with sincere affection. However, they also note that public appearances increasingly created the illusion of a stronger marriage than reality supported. Their story reflects how Hollywood's culture often encouraged stars to preserve appearances long after personal relationships had begun falling apart. Number 12. Mickey Rooney and Ava Gardner. Before Ava Gardner became one of Hollywood's greatest international stars, she married actor Mickey Rooney in 1942. At the time, Rooney ranked among the biggest box office attractions in America, while Gardner was an ambitious newcomer whose remarkable beauty had only begun attracting attention. Their whirlwind romance fascinated the press. Newspapers described them as opposites attracting, Rooney's energetic personality balancing Gardner's quiet Southern charm. Behind the excitement, however, the marriage faced immediate challenges. Rooney's demanding work schedule kept him constantly traveling, while Gardner struggled to establish her own acting career. Friends later recalled that they spent surprisingly little time together despite being newly married. Rooney also developed a reputation for frequent infidelity, creating deep emotional pain for Gardner. Within little more than a year, the marriage had collapsed. Although the relationship was brief, Hollywood publicity departments continued promoting cheerful photographs of the smiling couple until the divorce became unavoidable. Historians have never suggested the marriage itself was fake. Instead, they describe it as a youthful romance that simply failed under the pressures of fame, ambition, and immaturity. The glamorous image sold to audiences proved far more durable than the marriage itself, once again demonstrating Hollywood's remarkable ability to preserve appearances even as reality moved in a very different direction. Number 11. June Allison and Dick Powell. When beloved actress June Allison married actor and director Dick Powell in 1945, many fans considered them one of Hollywood's happiest couples. Both enjoyed enormous popularity, and together they represented the wholesome family values studios loved promoting during the post-war years. Unlike many celebrity marriages, theirs lasted nearly 2 decades. Nevertheless, biographers have noted that the relationship evolved into something far more practical than romantic during its later years. Powell devoted increasing attention to directing and producing, while Allison continued acting and raising their family. Friends observed that they functioned exceptionally well as partners and parents, even though the romantic spark reportedly diminished over time. Publicly, they remained the picture of domestic happiness. Interviews emphasized family life, mutual respect, and professional success, reinforcing the image of Hollywood's ideal marriage. After Powell's death in 1963, Allison spoke warmly about him, acknowledging both the love they shared and the difficulties they experienced along the way. Historians generally reject any claim that the marriage was manufactured. Instead, they argue it demonstrates another important truth about Hollywood. Sometimes relationships gradually transformed into enduring partnerships based more on loyalty, friendship, and shared responsibility than passionate romance. While not fake, the public image often appeared considerably more romantic than the everyday reality. Number 10. Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio. When Marilyn Monroe married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio in January 1954, the world watched what seemed like the ultimate union of Hollywood glamour and American sports royalty. Their wedding instantly became international news, with newspapers portraying them as the perfect couple destined to live happily ever after. Reality proved very different. DiMaggio valued privacy and hoped marriage would provide a quieter life away from constant publicity. Monroe's career, however, continued soaring. Crowds followed her everywhere. Photographers competed for every picture, and studios expected her to remain the world's biggest sex symbol. The famous incident during the filming of The 7-Year Itch, when Monroe stood above a subway grate as her white dress billowed upward before hundreds of spectators and photographers, reportedly became a major source of tension between them. DiMaggio disliked the intense public attention surrounding his wife, while Monroe believed her career required those public appearances. Only 274 days after their wedding, the marriage ended in divorce. Historians universally agree the relationship began with genuine love. Yet they also point out that the public fantasy surrounding America's sweethearts quickly became impossible to live up to. The marriage itself wasn't fake, but the fairy tale image promoted around it proved far more enduring than the brief reality behind Hollywood's brightest cameras. Number 9. Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller. When Marilyn Monroe married celebrated playwright Arthur Miller in 1956, the world was fascinated. Hollywood's biggest movie star had fallen in love with one of America's most respected intellectuals. To many, the marriage symbolized beauty meeting brilliance. At first, the relationship seemed refreshingly different from Monroe's previous romances. Miller admired her intelligence, while Monroe hoped marrying someone outside the traditional Hollywood system would bring stability and deeper emotional fulfillment. They often appeared together at literary events, film premieres, and international gatherings, presenting an image of sophistication rarely associated with Hollywood celebrity couples. Behind closed doors, however, enormous pressures mounted. Monroe struggled with anxiety, health problems, and the relentless demands of fame. Miller faced growing political scrutiny during the era of congressional investigations while trying to maintain his writing career. Their very different worlds gradually pulled them apart. Biographers have also discussed Miller's personal journals, which suggested he sometimes became frustrated by the realities of married life. Monroe reportedly discovered some of those private writings, causing deep emotional pain and further damaging the relationship. The couple divorced in 1961. Historians overwhelmingly reject the idea that the marriage was a publicity arrangement. Instead, they describe it as a sincere attempt by two remarkable individuals seeking happiness under extraordinary circumstances. Their public image of intellectual glamour remained captivating, even as the private relationship slowly unraveled beneath the weight of fame, expectation, and personal struggle. Number 8. Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher. When Elizabeth Taylor married singer Eddie Fisher in 1959, the wedding immediately became one of the most controversial events in Hollywood history. Fisher had recently divorced Debbie Reynolds, one of Taylor's closest friends, making the romance an international scandal before the couple had even exchanged vows. The public reaction was intense. Many believed Fisher had abandoned his family, while Taylor faced relentless criticism from newspapers around the world. Studios worried about the damage to both of their public reputations, and nearly every appearance together attracted enormous media attention. Despite the controversy, friends insisted Taylor and Fisher genuinely believed they were in love. For a time, they tried to build a life together while ignoring the endless headlines surrounding them. Unfortunately, constant public scrutiny, combined with Taylor's growing friendship with actor Richard Burton during the filming of Cleopatra, placed increasing strain on the marriage. As Taylor and Burton's relationship developed, Fisher found himself watching history repeat itself. The marriage ended in divorce in 1964. Historians generally agree this relationship was never fake. Instead, it became another example of how authentic emotions could become completely overshadowed by publicity, scandal, and relentless media coverage. The headlines often became bigger than the marriage itself, leaving little room for the couple to live ordinary lives away from the spotlight. Number 7. Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. For decades, Hollywood gossip columns occasionally linked Joan Crawford romantically with silent film legend Douglas Fairbanks Sr., leading some later writers to mistakenly suggest they had once been married. They were not. The confusion likely grew because Crawford socialized with many of Hollywood's biggest stars during the late silent era and early sound period. Fairbanks Sr. and his wife, Mary Pickford, were among the industry's most famous couples, and Crawford often attended the same premieres, charity events, and studio gatherings. Over time, repeated gossip blurred historical facts. Some sensational articles exaggerated friendships into romances, while others incorrectly listed Fairbanks among Crawford's former husbands. Modern historians have carefully corrected those claims. Crawford's documented marriages were to Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Franchot Tone, Philip Terry, Alfred Steele, and several others, not Douglas Fairbanks Sr. This mistaken story perfectly demonstrates one of Hollywood's biggest problems during the studio era. Publicity departments, gossip columnists, and rumor mills frequently mixed speculation with reality until false stories became accepted as fact by later generations. When discussing so-called fake Hollywood marriages, separating verified history from decades of recycled gossip becomes essential. Sometimes the greatest Hollywood illusion wasn't a marriage at all. It was a story that never actually happened. Number 6. Janet Leigh and Robert Brandt. After her highly publicized divorce from Tony Curtis, Janet Leigh married stockbroker Robert Brandt in 1962. Unlike her previous marriage, this relationship attracted far less attention because Brandt was not a Hollywood actor. Even so, many reporters wondered whether the quieter union could survive the pressures of celebrity life. Leigh intentionally stepped away from the non-stop publicity that had surrounded her earlier marriage. Friends later recalled that she valued privacy more than glamorous headlines, preferring a stable home life over constant red carpet appearances. Because Brandt remained outside the entertainment industry, rumors occasionally suggested the marriage existed mainly to restore Leigh's wholesome public image after her divorce. Historians generally dismiss those claims. The couple remained together for more than 4 decades, until Leigh's death in 2004, making it one of Hollywood's longest-lasting marriages. Rather than serving as another publicity romance, the relationship demonstrated that many stars quietly found lasting happiness away from studio cameras. Leigh herself later described Brandt as a calming influence, who allowed her to enjoy a far more normal life. Their story provides an important contrast to many earlier entries. Sometimes Hollywood audiences expected every marriage to hide a secret, when in reality, some of the industry's happiest relationships simply stayed out of the spotlight. Number 5. Cary Grant and Barbara Hutton. When Cary Grant married heiress Barbara Hutton in 1942, newspapers called it the perfect union of Hollywood royalty and immense wealth. Hutton was one of the richest women in the world, while Grant had become one of cinema's most beloved leading men. Almost immediately, gossip columnists questioned Grant's motives. Some accused him of marrying for money, while others suggested the relationship helped strengthen his already polished public image. Grant strongly rejected those accusations throughout his life. In fact, historians point out that Grant famously refused to accept financial settlements after the marriage ended, a decision many biographers believe supports his claim that wealth had never motivated the relationship. The marriage itself faced numerous challenges. Hutton struggled with personal insecurity and years of intense media attention, while Grant's demanding film career kept him traveling frequently. Despite genuine affection, emotional distance gradually developed between them. The couple divorced in 1945. Modern historians generally conclude that although outsiders often suspected strategic motives, the available evidence suggests Grant sincerely cared for Hutton. Their marriage reminds us that public assumptions often become part of Hollywood mythology, even when the documented facts tell a far more balanced story. Number 4. Robert Walker and Jennifer Jones. When Robert Walker married Jennifer Jones in 1939, Hollywood initially celebrated them as one of its brightest young couples. Walker was an ambitious actor with enormous promise, while Jones was beginning the remarkable career that would eventually make her one of the industry's biggest stars. As Jones' career accelerated under legendary producer David O. Selznick, the balance inside the marriage began to shift dramatically. Selznick became deeply involved in nearly every aspect of Jones' professional life, helping shape her career while spending increasing amounts of time with her. Eventually, their professional relationship developed into a personal one, creating enormous strain on Jones's marriage to Walker. Although the couple continued appearing together publicly for a time, friends later recalled that the emotional connection between them had already begun fading. Hollywood studios preferred projecting stability, so audiences continued seeing smiling photographs and polished public appearances, even while the marriage quietly unraveled behind the scenes. Walker reportedly struggled emotionally as the relationship collapsed, and the divorce became final in 1945. Jones married Selznick 4 years later. Historians generally agree that Walker and Jones genuinely loved one another when they married. However, the pressures of Hollywood success, powerful studio influence, and changing personal circumstances gradually transformed their marriage into one that appeared far stronger in public than it truly was in private. Their story remains one of the clearest examples of how the studio era often encouraged stars to preserve the appearance of a perfect marriage long after reality had changed. Number 3. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. Ironically, one of Hollywood's greatest love stories is included on this list because of the marriage that never happened. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy spent nearly 3 decades together, yet Tracy remained legally married to his wife, Louise Treadwell, until his death in 1967. Because of that unusual arrangement, countless rumors emerged over the years claiming Hepburn and Tracy had secretly married, staged ceremonies, or maintained a carefully constructed public relationship. None of those stories have ever been supported by credible historical evidence. Instead, what historians agree upon is that Hepburn and Tracy deliberately kept their relationship as private as possible. During the Golden Age, divorce carried enormous social consequences, particularly for someone like Tracy, whose wife and family remained an important part of his life despite their long separation. Hepburn understood the situation and rarely spoke publicly about their relationship while Tracy was alive. Movie studios also benefited from keeping the details vague. Both stars remained immensely popular, and avoiding controversy protected valuable careers. Their public appearances together were limited, and interviews almost never explored the true nature of their personal lives. Only after Tracy's death did Hepburn begin discussing the relationship more openly, emphasizing their deep affection while respecting the complicated circumstances surrounding it. Although there was never a fake marriage between them, their story perfectly captures Hollywood's obsession with appearances. Audiences constantly searched for a simple romantic ending, while the truth proved far more complex than any studio publicity department could have invented. Number 2. Greta Garbo. Few stars generated more romantic speculation than Greta Garbo. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, newspapers repeatedly predicted that the mysterious Swedish actress would soon marry one famous man after another. She was romantically linked to actors, aristocrats, businessmen, and even royalty. Yet Garbo never married. That remarkable fact created an endless stream of fabricated stories. Gossip magazines regularly claimed secret weddings had taken place overseas, or that quiet ceremonies had been arranged away from reporters. Every few months, another sensational headline promised that Hollywood's most private woman had finally become someone's wife. None of those reports proved true. Garbo fiercely protected her personal life, refusing to satisfy public curiosity. She rarely granted interviews, avoided Hollywood parties whenever possible, and disliked discussing romance with journalists. Her determination to maintain privacy only encouraged even wilder speculation. Modern historians generally agree that Garbo's refusal to conform to Hollywood expectations frustrated both studios and gossip columnists. During an era when marriage was often considered essential to maintaining a respectable public image, Garbo simply refused to play the game. Her story deserves a place on this countdown because it highlights another side of Hollywood illusion. Sometimes the biggest fake marriage wasn't an actual wedding at all. It was the endless rumor that one had secretly happened when no marriage ever existed. Number 1. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. If one marriage has become the lasting symbol of Hollywood's complicated relationship with truth, image, and public perception, it is Rock Hudson's marriage to Phyllis Gates. For decades, this relationship has stood at the center of discussions about the Golden Age studio system and the extraordinary pressure placed on actors to protect carefully crafted public identities. Hudson was one of the most successful romantic leading men in the world. His handsome appearance and wholesome image generated millions of dollars for the studios that promoted him. At the same time, persistent rumors about his private life circulated quietly throughout Hollywood. Many respected biographers have argued that the 1955 marriage helped reinforce Hudson's image as America's ideal leading man. They describe a studio culture where publicity, contracts, and career protection often influenced deeply personal decisions. However, historians also stress that the available evidence does not prove every aspect of the marriage was orchestrated. Phyllis Gates consistently maintained that she entered the relationship believing it was a genuine marriage built on love. Hudson himself never publicly labeled the marriage a sham, leaving many questions permanently unanswered. That uncertainty is precisely why the relationship continues to fascinate historians. It represents something larger than one couple. It symbolizes an era when Hollywood frequently blurred the line between public image and private reality, making it almost impossible for audiences to know where performance ended and real life began. Rather than proving every rumor true, the story reminds us that classic Hollywood often asked its biggest stars to live not only on movie screens, but also inside carefully managed public narratives. Classic Hollywood sold audiences unforgettable romances, glamorous weddings, and seemingly perfect love stories. But behind many of those famous photographs stood careers to protect, studios controlling public images, personal struggles, and relationships far more complicated than magazine headlines suggested. Some marriages were genuine, others became performances, and a few remain historical mysteries even today. Which relationship surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories from Hollywood's golden age.